on this computer. All right. So we have several Sequelize methods that we've used so far as part of the ORM, and we've used them through the model, right? And so far we've understood the model as basically just the schema creation. But it's actually a little bit more than that, and we're going to get into that a little bit today. Just so I can introduce a little bit more. It's not going to be much more, just a little bit. Yeah. So we've used the create, and that uses the model. And this is a method built into ORM that allows us to basically do an insert into our table called users. So if we use create in this way, it creates a JavaScript object, and it has the columns for email, password, age, and name populated with the different data types. What happens afterwards is this actually gets passed through to the MySQL node module from Sequelize, which then translates it directly to SQL. From there, the response from the database server gets passed to the MySQL node module, which then gets passed to the Sequelize node module. And then we get the information passed into the promise. And we can then do whatever we want with that information from there. Let's see. We also did some reads. So this is a create. This is a read. So this one will only find one row. So we specified exactly where to find that row. So this is the same thing in SQL as if you were to do, select this from this, where equals this, but more specifically limited to just one. So that takes care of it for you. So it just limits the searches to one based on the parameters that you find to narrow that search. So if you did where equals something, then it'll just find the first instance of that. If we wanted to find everything, and we use this a lot more, but if we just wanted to find a user or something, the find one would work really well. But let's say we wanted to find a lot of information. And find all doesn't mean give me everything back from the database. It's basically like give me everything, but then matching these criteria. In this case, there's no criteria to match, so everything will be returned from the users table. Remember that our models are set in singular form, but our tables are set in pluralized form. Can anyone tell me why? Tell me why. Why is it that our model, just think about it for a minute. Think about why our model is singular.
I think I have. So the model would be singular because it would be a category. In this example, we'd have it as a model for users.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that would be singular.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had the reason why what's the other part again?
Table?
Yeah, your table is plurals because you have multiples of those.
Exactly. So you have multiple instances of that model, or you have multiple rows of users, right? So you have multiple users, so that's why you have a table of users, as opposed to the model, which represents the representation of any one user, right? Excellent. Over here we have the update. So we've gone through create and read. So now we have update. What update does is allows us to essentially edit information, and most of the time this is on, it has to exist previously. So if you're editing information, you basically say, hey.
That's not coming. I told him because it's too late and that maybe we should.
Oh, okay. Wait, hold on. Give me a second. Let me pause this. All right. So Update, what it does is allows us to update existing information with new information. And we could update as many columns as we like in that particular row. So for instance, if you want to update, let's say Tom or something. So you say, okay, well, use this following information to then update and then replace wherever the ID is equivalent to this specific ID number. So what it does in the background is it searches for that row, and you can actually do it with multiple rows as well. And you guys have done this in SQL already, so you guys know this, but essentially it's doing the same thing just through object form. So what Sequelize does, it says, okay, here's the information I want to change, and this is going to be held in an object. So whatever information I want to change in that row is going to be held in this object. Now, make sure you change it where this row exists in the database, right? And then it'll change it, and then the information then returns, et cetera, et cetera. Destroy, this is pretty straightforward as well. This will just delete information, so it'll delete a row or multiple rows, depending on what you pass it for search criteria. So these are just the cheat sheet for the different examples we've gone over during the week. So make sure you guys do a git pull. Let's see. Alex and Justin, do you guys have access to this? I think
No.
Instructor has sent it out. Yeah?
I don't know. Let me check.
Are you guys finished with Sequelize?
Wait, how do you send it to us?
Well, we're done with Sequelize. So what happened was this was just pushed up with the last section, which was 15.3.
On the spreadsheet? I mean, I don't know where I'm looking.
I'm sorry?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The PDF that we just went over.
Yeah, how do I get that? I mean,
No, I mean, your instructor, they Slack out, or your TAs, they Slack out different files. Depending on how they're doing it, there's multiple ways of doing it. What I do is I push everything up to Git, and then I have my students pull from Git.
okay, yeah, I don't think we do that.
Okay, so you might have it slacked out too. If you guys don't have it slacked out, then we can slack it out.
Okay.
So if you guys need it, one of the students, if you guys can just pull and then send them the PDFs via, I don't know, Zoom chat allows you to send stuff. No. One easy thing to do would be, I can just host it and then send you to a link, but it's kind of a shitty way of doing it. Anyway, towards the end, just remind me and then I'll send it to you guys.
Okay.
All right. So another one, so the quick start guide with Sequelize is really important because we don't just use Sequelize, we actually use the command line interface with Sequelize that allows us to generate some stuff. We don't use the model generation other than the standard model generation, meaning that the CLI, when we generate models based on parameters being passed in, which is something we haven't covered, it tends to actually come out a little bit weird. So we don't like doing it that way. Instead, we just create the models from scratch. But we initialize the models folder and the configuration for the database through the CLI. So let's see. Who is from, let's see. I know that my students have done this, but I want to make sure that everyone we have with us knows as well. Who's Loteria, man? Is that Mario? That's definitely Mario. Okay. So I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So Justin and Alex, have you
Yes,
guys?
I am
Used,
Loteria man.
I'm sorry.
I am Loteria man.
I know. So have you guys used the Sequelize CLI?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's just do a quick review of the CLI. So we have the Sequelize. Oh, can you close the door? Right. So when we run our Sequelize CLI, we notice that we perform certain commands. So the commands that we performed was, let's see, they were initializing the configuration and initializing the models. So that's through here. So whenever you create a new project, this is what you want to start off with. And so what this does is it helps you set up your application, so it makes it easier for you to run Sequelize. Now, in the beginning, it might seem a little bit more complicated. So when we do this, you'll see something that looks like, let's see, this one. You'll see something like this for the config.json inside of config. And it might look a little weird. It's like development, test, production. So what this does is it helps you set up your different environments. And these environments are used by Sequelize and by your Express server to then, well, basically by Node, to then determine what environment you're on and then use the appropriate database. So if you're on development, it can detect, if you're on development, if you're in production, it can detect that. And so you're able to then use the appropriate environment to then log into the correct database. Now, on my development machine, I have it set to something like this, which makes sense. But if you have your production set up something like this, it wouldn't really make any sense, right? My host shouldn't be localhost. This makes sense. My database name would probably not be database production. My username and password should not be pushed up. So instead, what we're going to be showing you later is that you should be putting the environment variables in there so that you have access to them dynamically, as opposed to if someone were to look at your code on GitHub or some other hosting service for Git, that they don't have access to that. So that comes into play when you are running init config. So that initializes your configuration. Now, initializing your models starts you off with this index.js file. Now, this is pretty complicated, but if you go through it, it's actually not too bad. So the first thing it does is it's saying, okay, well, which environment are you on? Are you using an environment variable? If it is, then use the appropriate environment variable to go through Sequelize. Otherwise, just use the configuration, username, password, etc. So this one takes care of what environment you're on. From there, it actually does some really cool stuff where it will take all of the models inside of your models folder, and it basically just filters through them and runs a pretty simple algorithm, actually. And it stores each model name and the file path inside of DB. Sorry, my mouth is watering for some reason. That's weird. So from here, you have access to each model. So you notice at the very end, it's saying, okay, well, this DB seems to be an array, and each one has access to a model, and it's referring to a model object. So every time you reference this DB object, it's getting a different piece of information from that array. So it's also doing some, let's see, it's going through keys. Yeah, so it's also doing the associations as well. So at the end of this, essentially all it is saying like, hey, instead of me having to include each model every time I need it, I just include the models folder. So if I did something like this at the top of a file, what happens is I then have access to every model using db dot, and then I could just say user or db dot, I don't know, post or db dot author or whatever it is, right? And that allows me to just access all of them, and all I have to do is require models. So you don't really have to worry about it. It takes care of that for you, but just let you guys know that it is, this is what's happening over here. All right, so index.js, it's setting environment and the configuration. Now, you might be wondering, well, when we required the file, what I did was I just required the models folder. How does it know to look in the index.js? So who knows the answer to that one?
Is index just the default file?
Yeah, index is the default file, right? So it automatically looks for the index.js file. So if you're just including a folder, the first thing it's going to look for is the index.js file. So because of that, you have everything wrapped using this one nice succinct file, and that way you have the DB object. And then you're like, well, how do I get the DB object? It's like, oh, you're exporting just the DB object. So that's all you're getting back. All right. So next, configuring your database, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and all that information is in here as well. I forgot about that. Oh, another benefit, it gives all our models all of Sequelize's helper methods and make sure that all the associations between models are properly set up.
You want Cheetos? Awesome.
You guys want Cheetos?
Sure.
No. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so from there, we've created our models. So once you've done the CLI for the first time, what you're going to start doing is creating your models. Now notice your models run a little bit differently, so they're going to look something like this. And then you're just going to run a copy paste, right? So a copy paste allows us to then just do module.exports. And what we do is we export this entire function over here. So we're exporting all of this. And when we export it, we have access to author and all these things. Notice that we're doing it this way because index.js actually goes through each one of these and then has access to all of them using the DB object. So at the very top, you have var author equals sequelize.define. So this is the very first part of defining your model. And it's using this Sequelize definition. So it's using Sequelize define. And notice that we're getting past the Sequelize object and data types. So when this is being executed, we have access to Sequelize. So this actually gets executed upon run. So when it's first synced, then we have access to, or sorry, when the models are run the first time with the index.js, and they're all past this Sequelize and this data types. So then we have access to Sequelize. So we don't have to include it in each and every file. From there, we have the ability to say, okay, now this is going to be my model object. So var author equals sequelize.define, and we're just going to say author, which is the definition of, or the name of our model. And we're then going to say, okay, well, here are our different properties and values. So this one only has one, it has a name column, and the validation for that is going to be data types.string. Now, you guys should understand this part by now, right? So anyone have any questions about defining the model at this point?
Nope.
Okay. So now I've gone over how models can work to help, in this case, define our table structure or schema, right? What I haven't gone into is instantiating objects inside of our tables, right? So an instance of this model allows us to make a new row. So how validation of different data occurs is when you're actually doing a db model.create, you're actually instantiating a new instance of that model and creating it, and then using the validations on the model itself, and then running that through the ORM. From there, the ORM utilizes that MySQL node module, passes that information down to a JavaScript object. MySQL node module then makes a SQL query, comes back with whatever response you want, and you can use that information. So just a little bit more information, and that was it. So just understanding that on a conceptual level is important about what's happening in the background. So we have class methods over here. This is another thing that we went over. So the reason I wanted to bring up instantiation is because you can have both instance methods and class methods. So far, we've only gone over class methods. And class methods allow you to work with the model itself. So rather with the instantiated object from the author, let's say that you had, when you created a new author object from the model, you would then be instantiating from that model, and then you could use an instance method on that model that you can then define over here before that instantiated object gets sent into the database to be saved. So, I'm sorry, what was that? Am I hearing things? Oh, okay, cool. So instantiation is again when you're creating a new something out of like basically a constructor, right? So you're saying, okay, I have this model or this constructor, and it has all these different methods on it, and I have these class methods, and these class methods are going to work on every single model. But however, if I want to run an instant method, it's going to run only once you instantiate a new instance or a new row into the database, right? Or an instance of that. So it could be when you're creating it, it could be when you're returning that specific row or specific rows. So an instance of those, rather than something that exists on the model itself, okay? So you can think of the model as being a constructor, and instances of that constructor being the different rows inside of the table. Does that, it's not even an analogy, it's pretty much like a direct one-to-one relationship. Does that not make sense to anybody? Oh, Marcos, yes. Your explanation is totally not insane. All right. So, any questions so far? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, so instead of doing these class methods, right, on that block here on line 10, you would just do another property which says instance method?
Correct. So over here, I could have,
Okay.
I think I just pass it here.
So then this property instance method would only occur for certain occasions?
It would only occur on instantiated objects or objects that are returned back to you. So you can actually chain a whole bunch of shit together in Sequelize. So the chain occurs when you want to do certain things after you, let's say for some reason you create a bunch of stuff, right? So you created this new instance. You got some information from, I don't know, another table, so another model. You put that inside of that instance, and then you did some other stuff with it. You sent it to the database. It came back. You sent that information back in. Then, I don't know, you did some more stuff with it. You could just chain this on and on and on. You could do like, there's so many things you can do with that. I'm trying to come up with a real world example. I'm just drawing blanks at this point. Running a complex query through Sequelize, because it takes care of a lot of complexity for you. But
what about authentication? Is that where this comes into play?
Well, authentication actually is pretty simple if you're using Passport.js as well. So if you're using Passport.js, what's actually happening is Passport is a
NPM.
The node module that allows you to obfuscate or modularize and obfuscate your authentication process using a multitude of different things called strategies. So what happens is your information goes in and allows you to authenticate using the middleware. Now, when you're initializing that authentication, like Express makes things so easy because all you have to do is say, okay, before they go into this route, make sure they're hitting this route first and that they're authenticated. If they're not, then just send them back. So you really don't have to worry about too much. I'm going to be doing a lecture on Passport and authentication.
Sounds fun. Okay, what day are we going to do that?
Probably Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's also a structured curriculum for that already. So Sequelize Passport example, you guys should take a look at that as well.
Oh, really?
You guys should be able to see that, yeah.
Okay. 15-3.
Yeah, 15-3.
Okay, and then Monday,
Yay, Ben is so happy about authentication.
Well, it's one of the requirements, and we're getting close to, it's just one of the requirements, so. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I'll definitely cover it on Monday and Tuesday. I don't know why it wasn't in the regular stuff. I think that might have been like a oversight. So I'll definitely put that as a ticket.
Okay.
Okay. So we have class methods. So in this class method so far, all we've had is this association, right? And what association does is it creates a relationship between any table, right? So you can actually create multiple associations between different tables. A customer can have many books. A customer can have many tables. Like for some reason, let's say that you separated all of your items into different categories, like maybe furniture, maybe like lingerie. Like, I can't think of anything, or other random things that you decided to put into tables. Then you can write, author has many models.post, author has many, models.lingerie, models.furniture, author has many, all that. So you can set up multiple associations. Now, this won't actually set up anything inside of your table yet, because if you just set up a has many, this just allows you to do some really cool stuff like on delete. If you delete the author, it will delete everything that's associated to it as well. So for instance, if I were to delete this author, if it has many models, if it has many posts, or it has a relationship that says models.post, as soon as you delete the author, it will cascade downwards and delete every model onwards, right? That's associated to it. And that makes sense, right? You can't have a post and then delete the author. They are intertwined in that sense. So if you have a post without an author, then that kind of breaks the functionality of how your application works in the context of how we created the application. So we want to make sure that we set this up ahead of time. And another set on the other side is we have our post. Now the post is like, okay, we'll have way more validations, and this is supposed to be this. There we go. And what we did was we said, okay, this is a post model. And when you create a new one, it has to have a string for the title. And for the body, it just needs to have a text. Now, text is basically when you don't know how much information is going to be put in there. String is just varchar. Varchar is for the database. So eventually, don't forget, your SQL queries, or sorry, your JavaScript is all translating back into SQL queries, right? So you're not doing any like JavaScript directly into your database. You're only running your JavaScript for yourself, so it runs through your logic. You can perform validations and everything, but then everything gets translated by the module into SQL before it hits the MySQL server. Now, we did some other validations as well. We said, okay, allow null is false, meaning that they have to be there. When you instantiate that information, it has to have something in there. Validate, we put a length of at least 1. That means it just has to have something in there, right? At least 1 character. That's not a great validation, but I think what they wanted to do was make it more realistic for this particular application. Because if you're creating a blog, sometimes people have a post that's just like, a single character, like an emoji, right? Which can be considered a single character in Unicode. Or the body is just like a winky face, or it's just like an exclamation mark or something, right? So maybe it's some reference to Metal Gear Solid or something. I don't know, right? So it could have a bunch of different use cases for you to do that. But if you were to make this, something like a username and password, you'd have way different validations on it, right? So if this was a user object, it would definitely have to have, at least the length of X many characters, at least the length of this many characters on the password as well. And another thing is that this would not be the only validation. Where else would we have validations besides on the Sequelize model if we were to create authentication?
Through the forms, you would also from the front end.
Yes,
that's
from the front
one
end.
area.
Exactly.
That's one area, and then when it does the AJAX request, like making sure that, or on the other side of the AJAX request, which is going to be the server.js file.
So when the information gets passed to the controller, so the controller then has access to it, right?
Then if the controller says that information is fitting a certain criteria, then we can pass it to the model.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have multiple layers of logic that's preventing, or of validations that can check for a lot of different things, right? And some say it's like, okay, it shouldn't be like, that stringent because it, you can have multiple errors. Some say it should be like, isomorphic logic where you have like the same logic across multiple types. I just say, as long as you have logic that is similar, and that if you've done some tests, you've created some unit tests around it, then it should be okay. We haven't really gone into unit testing yet. I have created videos on it, but I don't think it's relevant yet because we're still just focusing on model view controller because we haven't really gone into like real controllers yet. We've gone into like pseudo controllers, which are essentially controllers. You can just rename them controllers instead of author API routes.js, HTML routes, and post API routes. So we really have gone into controllers. And I really like the way that the curriculum has actually made it now. It's much more readable and understandable using Sequelize. Whereas before, we had Sequelize in 1 day. They separated out into 3 days. So they really do listen to your guys' feedback. So make sure that you guys, if you guys are having trouble in certain areas, we research. We have a whole team that just takes care of iterating on this kind of stuff. So they're really good about listening to feedback and then making changes if necessary. From here, now we went into how we created a relationship between tables. but the relationship wasn't really defined yet. And what I mean by that is there was no foreign key object inside of the post model or the post table. And so this is where the there was no author key inside of the post table. So what happens over here is when you create this belongs to relationship, this is a Sequelize method. And what it does is it now creates that real association, and it generates this foreign key automatically whenever you run your application, when you perform the sync. So when you do post.belongs to, then it's saying, oh, okay, well, I belong to models.author. And just like one model can have relationships to many other models and can have many other models, something can belong to many different types. So you can say post.belongs to another thing as well, post.belongs to something else. And so you can, just continue having more and more relationships as much as you want in a very easy to write fashion, right? So you might be wondering, it's like, well, I don't understand, like, where does this foreign key come from? So post, when you do this belongs to and you run your application, and when it syncs, what happens is in your table, it looks at the structure and it will create a column there that matches author, and it will take the model name and it will attach ID to it. And that way, whenever a new post is created, the author ID will also be added into it. And notice that over here, it has to be not null, right? And this not logic always confuses people. Allow null just means make sure that it can't be null, right? It has to have something in there. All right. Now, our application on 15.3 was pretty complicated, but not on the back end. It was pretty complicated in terms of client-side JavaScript. And I kind of do like that because it gets you ready for the real world, where you're going to have a lot of complicated code that does what you think would be like a minimal amount of functionality. But the way they wrote it was really clean. They wrote it really well, and I think it does make sense. And they did it for you, right? Just so you guys get something to work with. So when we had the example from Saturday for our class, we did this for post author joins. So if we were to run the application, so first thing we do is npm install. And just want to make sure this is set up. All right, so you guys all recognize this application, right? Does everyone not have any idea what the hell this is? We're all good? All right. So if I type in a new post, notice that it first takes me to authors and says you must create an author before you can create a post. So I create this, Harriet Buddington, so I'm a child, and then that creates an author object. So if I go to my SQL Pro GUI, or whatever you guys want to use, you can use SQL Pro, you guys can use, fucking whatever GUI you want, or if you want to use your MySQL CLI, so if you guys are like, no, I'm hardcore. It's like, all right, let's use this then. So let's see, use, which one is this? Man, my memory is so bad. Where am I? Blogger. Okay, cool. I'm gonna get like Alzheimer like 30. Oh wait, I'm 31, so Alzheimer like 40. Okay, so I go to Blogger, and then from there, I'm gonna do show tables, and then I just run a SQL statement. So authors, and then I have Harriet Buddington. Okay, cool. For some reason, I thought this was wrong. I was like, who wrote Harriet Buddington? All right. So Harriet Buddington is the one that we just created. And we noticed that, it shows up in the table format. If you guys are using SQL Pro, just go in here, go to Blogger, and you can see the information here as well. So whatever format you want. So if I create a post, I can just put this. And just to test out our validations, I'll hit submit, and it allows us to create this. So now, if I go to select all from posts, I see my title and body. And the validation didn't fail because I at least have one character in each of these, right? So they're not null. But another curious thing happened. What curious thing happened that you guys can see from here?
The author ID is now
Author ID
column.
was generated, right? So
Yep.
this is auto-generated and gives an ID of 1. And notice that this ID matches this ID over here.
Oh yeah, that's
So that allows us from there to create associations and, well, sorry, they're already associated. From there, they're associated, so it allows us to create joins. Now, joins, they allow you to just get data across multiple tables that are associated, where the value of one matches the value of another. So as long as some value here matches some value here, you can get the information, and you can just say, okay, well, I just want ID and name from this column, or sorry, from this table, and I want title and body of everything matching where this ID matches this ID. And so you can combine them together in a nice query, get a lot of information back, and display that information however you wish, or use that information however you wish. So maybe you might want to say, it's like, okay, I have all these posts, but I don't like anything written by Harriet Buddington, right? So select all from, blah, 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 and, all from the post that have an ID from author, and do a join on authors. And when you display the information, instead of displaying the whole name, remove the last name. I don't like Buddington. That's not appropriate for my site. So that's just something that you can do. And notice that it doesn't actually change the information in the database with the tables. All it does is allows you to combine information together for you to use however you wish, right? So this is great. You can do this a lot if you're in business analysis or if you're in data science or something like that. So it has a lot of uses outside of just like traditional programming and creating things. All right. From there, we were using our queries. So our client-side JavaScript allows us to make queries to our backend. And so we were saying, okay, well, if it's hitting a GET route and it's API authors, then just use DB. So remember, the DB object, once you include it, it has access to all the different models inside. So you can say db.author and then .findAll, which is a method on the Sequelize model. Allows us to then say, okay, well, also include anything that's associated to it. So you can include things that are associated. So this join makes it super easy to do a join. And there's multiple ways of doing a join. So this is just a basic inner join. So find all the information that matches the primary key and foreign key on db.post. So wherever db.post has the same author ID, or at least has an author ID in this case, it will just return all that information as well. So this is going to return all that information together, and we're going to display all that information however we wish, right? So if I ran API/authors, I get not only my object back for Harriet Buddington, but all of her lovely posts, right? So this is the join that's happening over here. We get this back, and we also get this back. Notice that they're actually at the same level, right? So this post and this over here, they're actually at the same level. Okay, so it's a join, and it's combining it, it's joining it into one table. It's not really a table, it's joining into one query. The query comes back, and the information gets sent back to you. And this happens through SQL, the raw SQL, after it gets converted. All right. We did something similar for this one. So when we said, all right, get the specific ID of something, we did a find one, and we just passed in the ID that was sent. And so we just found the element based on the ID passed in as a parameter. And remember, this is just an express parameter that allows you to use URL parameters to then send information and then extract that information. And so we just use that params.id. So if you use params, then it's referring to anything with a colon in a path instead of a URL. From then, we can access the parameter using the parameter name as a variable or object, more of a property inside of params. So what we did was, once we did find one, we also included post. So if you just want to find that works too, right? And I'm doing it a manual way. We have all these paths being set inside of the UI. Because, okay, it's great. If you want to create a REST API, this is a REST API. But, you know, we don't just want to have people extracting information that are developers. We want a nice user interface. This over here. So you can manage authors, you can edit, all that stuff. So you create like a real content management system around it, right? You're not just interacting direct or interfacing directly with like, you know, developers anymore. You now have the ability to interface with clients that are less tech savvy and more, I don't know, Snapchatty. Same thing with if you're posting information, instead you're using body parser. So when you create information, you just set that inside the request.body. So body parser takes care of that for you. Delete, very similar. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There wasn't too much to Sequelize itself. I think a lot of the confusion comes with the client-side JavaScript this week more than anything else. All right, so before we move on to setting up Sequelize for production, do you guys have any questions? No? All right. Oh yeah, don't forget that the IT department at UCLA set all the open web to have blocked ports at so if you're using MySQL default is at 3306, so 3306 is blocked. To get around that, I have unlimited data on my cell, so what I'm just going to do is tether my phone, and that seemed to work. If you have your own, you know, VPN, I don't think it still will work because it still goes through this router, through the several ports. They tried it in class, it just didn't work. So rather than like, you know, just messing around with it, we're not transmitting that much data. And I have an unlimited plan anyway. So we asked the IT department at UCLA to fix that. I don't know why they're not getting like a real solution to that. I mean, I don't think it's really that dangerous to open up like database ports. because they're not hosting anything at those ports. So I don't know. I guess it's a lower priority on their end.
Yeah, I wonder. So I think, would I be able to use my own hotspot as well
Yeah.
on my server? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay.
All right, and don't forget. All right, actually, let me just take you guys through it instead of don't forget. Let's just do it together. Okay. So finally, the Heroku deployment process. What we're going to do is, this is pretty simple. It's not simple. Pretty similar to what we did for let's see, MySQL node module with Express. So make sure you guys have MySQL and Sequelize installed, and make sure that it's part of your package.json. What's the command to add it to your package.json?
And npm install
Yeah, npm install, and then
the package name, and then -- save.
yes, correct. Excellent. All right, so make sure you create a JAWS DB remote database first. So again, this is just a AWS instance that's free. Make sure you use Kitefin, the free process. That creates a free database server. Yeah, don't pay for the $1,800 a month one. From there, you're going to create a Heroku server. So this creates a server instance with a single worker on it. So make sure you type in Heroku create from the command line. Make sure you're inside of your application when doing so. Now, that will create a Git hook for you. Remember, what first happens is when you're using Heroku, you're actually creating this Git hook, because what happens is you're pushing to Heroku's Git remote server. And so when you push their Git remote, they actually construct your application from that Git remote and then deploy it to whatever link that they gave you. So you have a generated link, like for this one, Salty Wildwood 73721. You can actually generate custom domains as well. You can generate custom subdomains, meaning the first part of everything before .heroku app, as long as it's not taken, by just providing a parameter when you guys do Heroku create. If you guys want to use your custom domains, of course, you can do that as well. Heroku has instructions on how to do that. So if you want to go to flankybuttflap.com or something, then you can go ahead and do that. Now, make sure you guys do the same thing. Add some gift card, or you can add your real credit card or whatever it is to Heroku. And what that allows you to do is, you guys should probably use your credit card actually, because it will not charge it. I've never had an instance where it's ever been charged for the last 6 years. So make sure you guys add it. That way you can add add-ons. So add-ons are third-party services that integrate well with Heroku. So our JAWS DB MySQL database, for instance. So when we create one, it actually generates the database for you, the database name, the username, the password, and that's about it. All right, so to use this production environment, what you do is you set it to, now you go back to your config.json. I generally, before I push, I also serialize my password. I'll just remove my password and username, my development. I know it doesn't really matter because someone has to have access to my actual computer in order to utilize it, but I'm still kind of paranoid. So what I normally change is this production. So if we do use environment variable, what happens is this will actually check using that index.js file that we're talking about if it's pushing up. So if this environment variable does exist, so we go back here, let's see. So this is checking to see if use environment variable does exist. And if it does, let's see, then it'll check that use environment variable, which is JAWS DB URL. And that environment variable, again, it's not set on your application, it's set dynamically, so that before you push up your information, you get that information out of Heroku. Heroku then dynamically injects the credentials into this config JSON, and then allows you to then just dynamically, it's already dynamically inserted information. From there, just authenticate, and then be able to use your application from there and be able to push up. So that should take care of any configuration parts. So it's actually really cool because it makes it really easy to set everything up. So all you really have to do is as long as you've provisioned JAWS DB URL ahead of time, you should be okay on this use environment variable and dialect. Dialect just determines what type of database you're using. So remember that SQL type databases, there are multiple types. There's like MS SQL, there's MariaDB, there's MySQL, Postgres, all that stuff. From there, all you have to do is git push Heroku master, and then you can open up the Heroku application from your terminal if you wanted to. Otherwise, you can just go to the link that they provide. So the link that they provide is this one over here, right? All right. That's about it. Any questions? Not so bad, right? Sequelize, pretty cool. All right. Am I allowed to go eat now? Have I been a good boy?
Hey, Omar, how can I get these quick start guides?
What's up?
How can I get these quick start guides? I have one of them actually.
Who is that?
Justin.
Justin.
Just sorry.
I just asked my TA for him.
Did you finish 15.3?
We don't go by those numbers.
Did you do 3 days of Sequelize?
We did, yes.
Okay. Shit. How do I send?
Well, shouldn't they be in the GitLab repository?
It should be, but I'm not sure if it was pushed up. Let's see for them, because each cohort has their own repository.
I see.
Yeah, I can just send it to you guys. I don't see why not. So just send me your email, and I'll just send it to you guys directly. So just PM me your email via the Zoom chat right now.
So is that it for today, Omar? Is that all for today? For tonight?
That's it. So
Okay.
have fun.
Thank you.
Good luck on project week, guys.
Thank you very much.
Work really hard. Put a lot of time into it.
Yes.
Remember, it's really important for getting jobs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Thank
right?
you, Omar.
You guys can do it. I believe in you guys. All right.
We believe in you too.
This dog believes in me. Where's my dog picture? I don't have a dog picture. He believes in me. He or she believes in me too.
All right, Omar. Catch you later.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Good night.